It was a night that many believed would never come. As darkness spread across the vast territory of Eastern Europe, the silence before midnight felt unusually heavy, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Then, without warning, the sky over occupied territories and deep inside Russian military infrastructure ignited. Explosions echoed across multiple regions almost simultaneously, lighting up the horizon in a way that could be seen from miles away. This was not a routine exchange of fire. This was not a symbolic strike. This was a calculated, coordinated, and devastating operation that marked one of the most significant nights of the entire war. For Ukraine, it was a great night. For Russia, it was a night of fire, confusion, and shock. For months, analysts had debated whether Ukraine possessed the capability to carry out such a deep and wide-reaching assault. Many claimed Ukrainian forces were exhausted, overstretched, and limited to defensive actions. Others insisted that Kiev was quietly preparing something far larger, something that would change the balance of perception, if not the balance of power itself. That night, the answer arrived in flames. Shortly after the first explosions were reported, social media channels in Russia began to flood with frantic posts. Residents described hearing repeated blasts, emergency sirens, and the roar of aircraft scrambling into the sky. In several cities, power went out. In others, fuel depots burned uncontrollably, sending thick black smoke high into the air. Military airfields, ammunition storage facilities, logistics hubs, and command centers were reportedly hit in rapid succession. The sheer scale of the operation suggested months of intelligence gathering, precise targeting, and a level of coordination rarely seen since the war began. What made this strike particularly stunning was not just the damage, but the timing. Russia had spent weeks projecting confidence, boasting about its air defenses and claiming full control over the situation. State media had reassured the public that any Ukrainian attempt at escalation would be swiftly crushed. Yet on this night, those assurances collapsed under the weight of reality. Missiles and drones penetrated defenses that were supposed to be impenetrable. Targets that were believed to be safely out of reach were suddenly burning. Inside Ukraine, the mood was electric, though officials remained measured in their statements. It was clear that something extraordinary had taken place. This was not just retaliation. This was a message that Ukraine was still capable, still resilient, and still able to strike back with force and precision. For a population that had endured relentless bombardment, power outages, displacement, and loss, this night offered something rare and powerful, a sense of momentum. As more details emerged, it became apparent that the strike was not random. Each target served a strategic purpose. Fuel depots crippled supply lines, airfields damaged aircraft and disrupted future operations, ammunition stores reduced Russia's ability to sustain intense artillery barrages, communication centers were hit to sow confusion and delay response times. This was warfare executed with intent, not desperation. Russian officials were slow to respond. Initial statements were vague, downplaying the extent of the damage and claiming that most incoming threats had been intercepted. But images and videos told a different story. Fires burned for hours. Emergency crews struggled to contain the destruction. In some areas, evacuations were reportedly ordered, a rare admission that the situation was not under control. The contrast between official statements and visible reality only fueled public doubt. International observers reacted swiftly. Analysts described the strike as one of the most significant Ukrainian operations since the war began. Some called it a turning point, others a psychological blow that could have lasting consequences. Even those who were cautious in their assessments acknowledged that Russia had been caught off guard. The element of surprise, long considered one of Ukraine's strongest advantages, had once again proven decisive. Behind the scenes, this operation reflected a transformation that had been unfolding quietly over time. Ukraine's military had adapted. It had learned from early setbacks, integrated new technologies, and refined its tactics. Intelligence sharing, both domestic and international, had improved dramatically. Precision had replaced brute force. Flexibility had replaced rigid doctrine. This strike was the result of that evolution. For Russia, the implications were troubling. The war, which had been presented as distant and controlled, suddenly felt closer to home. The sense of security that many Russians believed existed within their borders was shattered. When critical infrastructure burns and explosions light up familiar skylines, the war stops being an abstract concept. It becomes personal. Throughout the night, Russian air defenses fired relentlessly, trying to intercept what they could. The sky glowed with tracer fire and missile trails, but the volume and coordination of the attack overwhelmed these systems. Some drones appeared to act as decoys, drawing fire while others reached their targets. This tactic, increasingly seen in modern warfare, demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of enemy defenses. As dawn approached, the full scale of the damage began to emerge. Satellite imagery showed scorched areas where key facilities once stood. Reports indicated significant losses in equipment and supplies. While exact numbers were difficult to verify, the impact was undeniable. Repairs would take time. Replacement would require resources already stretched thin. In Kiev, officials spoke carefully but confidently. They emphasized Ukraine's right to defend itself and to target military assets used to wage war against its people. There was no triumphalism, no reckless boasting. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement that this operation was necessary and justified. The restraint in tone only added to the weight of the moment. For Ukrainian civilians, this night was about more than military success. It was about dignity. It was about showing that suffering did not equate to surrender. Families who had spent nights in shelters, listening to explosions overhead, now watched footage of strikes far from their homes. For the first time in a long while, the fear felt balanced by resolve. The psychological impact of this strike cannot be overstated. Wars are fought not only with weapons, but with narratives. For months, Russia had attempted to project inevitability, portraying its victory as only a matter of time. This night challenged that narrative. It showed that the outcome was still contested, that the future was not predetermined. Experts noted that such operations also serve a deterrent purpose. By demonstrating the ability to strike deep and hard, Ukraine increases the cost of continued aggression. Every fuel depot destroyed, every airfield damaged, represents not just a loss of material, but a blow to confidence and planning. Commanders must now factor in vulnerabilities they previously ignored. Inside Russia, the reaction was mixed. Some expressed anger, blaming leadership for failing to protect critical assets. Others questioned the wisdom of continuing a war that was now bringing destruction closer to home. While state media attempted to maintain a united front, cracks were visible. Silence on certain channels spoke louder than words. As the day unfolded, diplomatic circles buzzed with speculation. Would this strike escalate the conflict? Would it force new negotiations, or would it provoke retaliation? History offers no simple answers. But what was clear was that the strategic landscape had shifted. Assumptions held before this night no longer applied. For Ukraine's allies, the strike reinforced arguments that continued support was making a difference. Precision weapons, training, and intelligence had combined to produce tangible results. For skeptics, it posed difficult questions about how far the conflict might go. The balance between supporting self-defense and avoiding escalation remained delicate. Yet amid all the analysis and speculation, one truth stood firm. This was a demonstration of agency. Ukraine was not merely reacting to events, it was shaping them. In a war often defined by suffering and loss, this night stood out as an assertion of capability and will. As evening returned and the fires continued to smolder, the echoes of the previous night lingered. For Russia, it was a sobering reminder that the war was far from under control. For Ukraine, it was a moment of validation, proof that endurance and adaptation could yield results. No single strike can decide a war. No single night can erase the pain already endured. But some moments carry symbolic weight far beyond their immediate impact. This was one of those moments. A night when expectations were shattered, when assumptions burned alongside fuel depots, and when the world was reminded that this conflict is dynamic, unpredictable, and far from over. The biggest strike of the war did more than make Russia burn. It reignited belief that resistance matters, belief that strategy can overcome size, belief that even in the darkest hours, a great night can still arrive. And as the smoke drifted into the morning sky, one thing became clear to everyone watching. The war had entered a new phase and nothing would look the same again.